The letters in the attic. When old Mr. Whitfield passed away in his sleep at the age of 92, his granddaughter Ellie was the one tasked with clearing out the house. It seemed fitting somehow. She had been the only grandchild who ever sat with him for hours on the porch, listening to stories about a life that stretched back further than she could imagine, a life of dust bowls and diners, of a war he rarely spoke of, and a wife he had loved for 61 years before losing her to illness a decade earlier. The rest of the family had scattered after the funeral, promising to help with the house soon, though everyone knew that meant Ellie would do it alone. She didn't mind. There was something peaceful about being in her grandfather's home without the weight of grief crowding every room, just quiet and dust and memory. It was on the third day in the attic that she found the box. It was tucked beneath a stack of old quilts, wrapped in a plastic bag as if someone had once tried to protect it from time itself. Inside were letters, dozens of them, tied together with faded ribbon, addressed in careful cursive to my dearest Margaret. Margaret, her grandmother's name. Ellie sat down right there on the attic floor, sunlight slanting through the small round window, and began to read. The first letters were from 1953, written when her grandfather was stationed overseas during his military service. They were full of longing and small, aching details, the taste of coffee that wasn't as good as the coffee back home, the sound of rain on a tin roof that reminded him of her laughter, a pressed flower he'd found and wanted to send but worried wouldn't survive the journey. "I don't know what waits for me when I come home," one letter read, "but I know it doesn't matter so long as you are there. You have become the definition of home to me, Margaret. Not a place, a person." Ellie's eyes stung. She had never known her grandfather as a young man in love, only as the quiet, steady presence who fixed her bicycle chain, who taught her to fish, who sat beside her mother's hospital bed without a word during the darkest weeks of Ellie's childhood. This version of him, raw and yearning and afraid, was someone new entirely, and yet somehow exactly the same. She kept reading, letters spanning years, then decades. Some were from during their marriage, written during business trips, or the one summer they'd spent apart when her grandmother went to care for her ailing mother in another state. Others were newer, written after her grandmother's death, when Ellie's grandfather had apparently kept writing to her, even though there was no one left to receive them. "Margaret, our granddaughter, graduated today. She wore your ring on a chain around her neck, the one I gave you in '61. I wanted so badly to tell you how beautiful she looked, how proud you would have been. I still tell you things. I don't think I'll ever stop." Ellie realized with a sudden and overwhelming clarity that these last letters were about her. About moments she remembered: her graduation, her wedding, the birth of her first child. Her grandfather had been writing to his late wife about her entire life, folding Ellie into a conversation that spanned nearly 70 years. She found the final letter at the bottom of the box, dated only 3 weeks before he died. "My dear Margaret, I think I'll be seeing you again soon. I'm not afraid. I've had a good, long life, and most of the good in it came from loving you and watching our family grow because of it. Ellie is going to find these letters one day. I hope she does. I hope she understands that love doesn't disappear, it just changes shape. It becomes memory. It becomes the people we raise and the people they become. Tell our daughter I love her when I see her. Save me a seat." Ellie sat in the attic for a long time after that, letters spread across her lap, the afternoon sun shifting slowly toward evening. She thought of her grandfather's steady hands teaching her to cast a fishing line. She thought of her grandmother's laugh, half remembered from childhood, now made vivid again through his words. She thought of the family scattered across the country, each carrying pieces of these two people without ever fully knowing the depth of what had shaped them. That evening she called her mother. "I found something," Ellie said. "You need to come see it, all of you." The following weekend, the family gathered at the old house for the first time without an occasion forcing them together. No funeral, no holiday, just an invitation. Ellie's mother came, along with her aunt and uncle, 3 cousins Ellie hadn't seen in years, and even her great-uncle Robert, who rarely left his home in Ohio anymore. They sat in the living room, the same room where Ellie had once listened to her grandfather's stories, and she read the letters aloud. Some of them made the room laugh: her grandfather's clumsy attempts at poetry, his complaints about army food, a story about how he'd once gotten lost trying to buy her grandmother a birthday gift and ended up 3 towns over. Others made the room fall silent, tissues passed hand to hand, as decades of love and grief and devotion unfolded in his careful handwriting. When Ellie reached the final letter, the one written 3 weeks before his death, her voice caught on the words, "Save me a seat." Her mother reached over and took her hand. Her aunt was openly weeping. Even Uncle Robert, who Ellie had always thought of as unshakably stoic, wiped quickly at his eyes and looked away toward the window, the same window her grandfather used to look through, waiting. "We should have known this," her mother finally said, breaking the silence. "We lived so close to it, and we still didn't know." "That's the thing about family," Ellie's aunt replied softly. "You think you know the whole story because you were there for parts of it, but everyone carries pieces you never see." They decided that night to do something her grandfather likely never expected. They typed up the letters, all of them, and had them bound into a small book. Not for the world, just for the family. A record of a love that had quietly built the foundation for everything that came after it. Children, grandchildren, a great-grandchild on the way. A family history not written in dates and facts, but in the aching, tender language of a man who never stopped loving his wife, even in the years he lived without her. At the front of the book, Ellie added a single line, one she felt captured everything the letters had taught her about where she came from and who she was because of it. "Love doesn't disappear. It becomes memory, it becomes family." Years later, when Ellie had children of her own, she would read them stories from the attic, not fairy tales, but real ones, about a soldier and his sweetheart, about letters crossing oceans and decades, about a chair that was always, in some way, saved for someone. Her children grew up understanding something many people spend a lifetime searching for, that they were not simply born into a family, but into a story, one that had been written long before they arrived, and one they were now responsible for continuing. And on quiet evenings, when the house was still and the light slanted just right through the windows, Ellie sometimes swore she could feel it, the quiet, steady presence of two people who had loved each other so completely that even death hadn't been able to end the conversation.